is Raymond Burse, and I'm here with this version of Lift Every Voice, a program of the NAACP in which we choose to be informative to our community to let you know what is going on, what we're involved in, and what are the issues of our day. Today, what I'd like to do is to talk to you about what does the NAACP do. Lots of people ask the question, you can point back to history in terms of regards to what the NAACP does, but what is it doing today in our community? How is it making a difference? And so I want to talk to you about that. But to talk to you about that, I have to also inform you that the local branch of the NAACP, all of its officers, everyone is a volunteer. So people volunteer their time to make certain that civil rights, educational rights, human rights are in fact enforced. And because we are a volunteer organization, we're always looking for volunteers to come on board to help us do the things that we're doing in the community. And I'm going to talk to you about some of those things. And I'd like to start with what I consider one of the most important areas, and that is the area of education. Education can be a game changer. It can make a difference in individuals' lives, where they go and what they're able to do. And there are some notable things happening in our community around education. I start first with what is called Evolve 502. Evolve 502 is a program designed to, in fact, make available to every student who is currently enrolled in a Jefferson County public school, high school today, make available to them a free 2-year college education plus a stipend per term. That is Evolve 502. So what I would like everybody to understand is the scholarship is available, but it requires some action on your part. It requires you to make an application. So for those high school seniors who are listening to this program today, I encourage you to contact your guidance counselor, contact your principal, get the application. It is online and it's available, and make an application. Because I can remember when I was getting ready to come out of school, I did not know where I was going to go and whether I could afford it. But having scholarship money available made a real difference. So with Evolve 502, you get a free 2-year tuition-free scholarship to Jefferson Community and Technical College here in Louisville, or even to Simmons College, which represents a significant opportunity for you to be able to do something to advance your life and move on to the next level. So I ask you, both parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, talk to your nieces and nephews, sons and daughters and grandchildren about the Evolve 502 application process and make certain that they submit that application. In addition to the Evolve 502, one of the big areas of discussion that is ongoing in our community right now is around the student assignment program. Now, most of us, and I do too, relate the student assignment program to the busing that has gone on in this community since back in the mid-1970s, and it continues today. The program, when it was originally put in place in the 1970s, placed a heavy burden upon African American students in regards to the desegregation of schools in other parts of the county. Students from the black community have carried the burden of busing and desegregation all of those years. And it's been a tremendous burden, and nobody can say it has not been. But what we're now looking at is a new student assignment plan that is being proposed by Superintendent Marty Polio. And I think all of us have to be very, very careful about what that student assignment plan is, how we're engaged in it, what do we do, and understanding it. And so my first thing is I encourage everyone in our community, particularly those parents, to understand what is the student assignment plan and what does it provide for my kid, my child, what does it provide for my community. The new student assignment plan is being dubbed as a choice plan, and it is a choice plan. It is a choice plan for students in West Louisville who will, for the first time under this plan, have the ability to choose to attend a high school or a middle school in their community. There is no doubt, if you've seen maps of where students from West Louisville attend schools, you can have kids in the same block attending as many as 20 different schools across Jefferson County. That is a tremendous burden, and on those students. And it, in fact, doesn't allow you to build cohesion around community, what is going on, and what people are doing. So the Student of Choice Plan will allow students in West Louisville to choose to attend a high school in West Louisville, which would be Shawnee, or a middle school in West Louisville, which would be the new middle school that they're planning on building. That represents a great choice for our kids or kids in West Louisville to attend schools close to home. And it sounds good, and it is good, but also we need to look deeper. It's one thing to say I have a choice to attend the school closer to my home, but what is the quality of the school that I'm going to attend? What are the programs that are going to be available to me in that school in terms of what's taking place? If you look at student achievement, there continues to be a racial gap in educational attainment between black students, white students, and other students. This achievement gap has existed for a number of years. So my question is, when we talk about the student assignment plan and giving us a choice, what will that choice do to the achievement gap? How will it change, and how will it impact what is taking place? You know, I was in regards to the building of the new schools, it's saying, you know, they're giving us shiny new toys, which is good, but what is going to happen within that shiny new toy? What kind of educational attainment, what kind of educational programming will be there? What will happen with the kids who are in there? And then one of the other things that we need to know, that when we talk about a choice for students who live in West Louisville, not all students of color live in West Louisville. And so when you talk about what's going to happen to the students in West Louisville in their school, the question also has to be asked, what is going to happen to students in other parts of the community, particularly African American students? We know that this achievement gap has persisted for a number of years. So the question is, will the student assignment plan bring about fundamental changes in terms of how we address what is going on in those classrooms? Will it change in terms of the number of African American administrators who are in the central office? Will it change the number of principals who are leading our schools? Will it change the number of teachers who are teachers of color who are there? You know, the reality of it is that students have a tendency to perform better, to behave better, and do the things that they need to do when they see someone at the front of the classroom who looks like them. It has an impact. And so JCPS has to be aware of how many of those individuals are being presented in our classroom. When you look at Jefferson County School District, which is almost 100,000 students, and almost I think 38% of them are African American, you take that number and you compare that with our 38% of the administrators in the central office, African American, are 38% of the teachers in this classroom, African Americans, are 38% of the principals, counselors, and others who lead our school in there. Are they reflective of our community? So that as we look at choice and know that it is a good thing, look much deeper. Look to the bottom line in terms of how is this truly going to impact and make certain that schools of color, and in particular here, black students, are going to achieve and learn to be able to excel and do all the things that they need to do to be successful. I'm all in favor of student choice. The NAACP is all in favor of choice, but we also know that choice brings with it. So if students in West Louisville all decide to choose to attend schools in West Louisville, we will go back in time in terms of resegregating our schools. And resegregating from some people's perspective is a bad thing. For some others, it is a good thing. But I think the question we have to raise is what is going to be done to help our kids and our students achieve, succeed, and do well. And that's what the choice plan is all about. There will be lots of discussion in the coming weeks around student assignment. I ask that you learn, look at what is going on, become as informed as you can so that you will know what is taking place within our schools. It is important that you be there so that your voice gets heard and that you make an informed decision. The NAACP is asking you to lift up and let your voice be heard in the student assignment area as this takes place. This is important, and we ask that you do that. So, with that, you're going to take a short break, and we'll be back. And the next thing we're going to talk about is Breonna Taylor and criminal justice reform.
I am the largest,
the oldest.
I am the baddest,
the boldest.
I am protecting our voting rights
and our environment.
I am ending racial profiling
and fighting HIV/AIDS.
I am advancing economic equality
and equality
for all.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am NAACP. Are you?
Take a stand at IamNAACP.org.
The loss of Breonna Taylor for over 100 days, almost 200 days now, just wondering how you felt, because so often you're asked to respond without tapping into your feelings or even being able to express your feelings. How did you feel as a Black woman hearing about the charges in the Breonna Taylor case or the lack thereof?
It was a gut punch in many ways. I have been in conversations with her mother, Tamika Palmer, for months now. And the first conversation that I had with her, she talked about her daughter, and therefore the life that has now been lost. Breonna Taylor was a caregiver in her spirit and her nature. She cared for her grandmother. She cared for her family. She cared for her community. She cared for society. She cared for people she had never met, which is why she wanted to be, as her life dream, a nurse, but decided to first become an EMT so she could respond to the call on the street, so that she would understand what was happening in the streets, on the ground, and be able to respond immediately. That's why she became an EMT with a life's purpose and dream of becoming a nurse. And she was beautiful inside and out in every way. And it is tragic. And I have been saying from the beginning that her life deserves to be valued and to be honored. And she and her family and the rest of the community deserve justice. They deserve justice then, they deserve justice today, and they deserve justice tomorrow. And it's now become cliche, but it just remains true. I will not stop speaking her name.
Welcome back. In this segment, I like to talk about Breonna Taylor and criminal justice reform and all of the events which have occurred around what has been a dark period in our community. As we sit here and we begin to think about what has taken place and do things, there are events that are occurring around our community that are very, very impactful to what was going on and what needs to be done. As I sit here, the city, utilizing many hours of community citizens' time, spent a lot of time looking at police accountability and police review, a civilian review board. That body spent months coming up with an ordinance, a draft ordinance that was debated back and forth. Some people agreed with parts of it, some didn't, but out of that committee came an ordinance that was suggested and recommended to be adopted for purposes of creating a civilian review board with several provisions in it for the protection of our community. I'm sad to admit that out of that is the ordinance which has gone to the Metro Council, at least at this point through a committee, and maybe by the time you hear this, to the full council itself, has put in place what some have termed poison pills. And if you're in the corporate community, you understand that when you're doing corporate transactions or you're trying to prevent something from being effective, you oftentimes put a provision in which is called a poison pill. To the ordinance that was drafted by a citizen committee working across differences, across races, across organizations, that was put in place and agreed to, 3 poison pills have been placed in that ordinance. One relates to how many hours a person who is going to serve on the Citizen Review Board has to ride in a police car. The original plan, as debated by the members, was that would be 16 hours. That has now been changed, or at least amended in the current version that's being considered, up to 40 hours. A major commitment in terms of any individual who may want to serve on one of those bodies. The second thing that they have done is the ordinance provided that the individuals who could appoint individuals for consideration to this board was not limited, but in fact was open and broadly. Now they have added a provision that provides that law review enforcement related agencies will now have the ability to nominate individuals to serve on the Police Accountability Board. One of the things that we've been trying to do and trying to do is to bridge the gap between the police and the community, improve community relations, and more than that is to improve trust among the police and the community. And that provision smacks of the kinds of things that people have been wary of for years as it relates to police accountability. The third thing that they have done is that this body will report to a chief inspector who would serve as the head of the organization to do that. And the ordinance, as originally drafted, left open broadly who could serve in that inspector general role. And one of the things that the committee actually did see, that the person who served did not necessarily have to have criminal justice training or responsibility or experience. That has now been changed and put into the ordinance. So what started out as a project to in fact build and enhance community relations has been overtaken by individuals on the Metro Council who do not see, as I do, or as the NAACP sees, what is necessary to build community trust. It's something that we need to work on, and it's just needed there. The other thing, as we talk about Breonna Taylor and criminal justice reform, there are still pending in this community. There have been at least 3 members of the grand jury that was convened by the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Kentucky who have spoken publicly about the process of the grand jury and what was allowed to occur. Those grand jurors have specifically looked to and spoken about the inability for them to have full information, the inability for them to ask questions, the inability for them to raise doubt as to whether or not those individuals who have been charged should be charged in terms of the officers involved in that case. And I contrast for you how the grand jury proceedings were in fact laid out and followed in the case of grand jury looking into the Breonna Taylor shooting itself versus how the grand jury was handled when Kenneth Walker was in fact indicted. In the case of Kenneth Walker, less than 2 minutes was spent with the grand jury before he was indicted for attempted murder of a police officer. It was clear from the very beginning what the prosecutors wanted and what they were looking for, and they went after it. as it relates to Breonna Taylor, even though they say they deliberated for 2 to 3 days, or at least they met for over 2 to 3 days, how the information, or at least the testimony and information was delivered to the grand jury, differed in terms of where it was. They were not given all of the information. They were not told what the various charges could be and what is necessary. And so as we look at the criminal justice system in our community, we've got to raise question as to whether those who are charged with responsibility for the enforcement of our laws are in fact following and doing what they need to be able to do. People ask the question, at this point in time, as it relates to the Breonna Taylor case, where do we go from here? And I would suggest to you that there are at least 2 to 3 options available to us. Is number one, the Commonwealth Attorney in Jefferson County, Tom Wine, has the ability to reconvene a grand jury to look into the Breonna Taylor shooting and case. He has that authority. He has that ability. And we should be asking him, why are you not exercising that? And why are you not doing that? You know, his answer to in others is that I have a conflict of interest. His conflict of interest lies in the fact that the case against Kenneth Walker was dismissed with prejudice and without prejudice. And what that means, folks, is without prejudice means that the case can be brought back against Kenneth Walker. And is now up to the Commonwealth Attorney as to whether or not that is done. If Kenneth Walker was defending his castle, defending his lady, defending himself, then there is no reason why Tom Wine at this point could not publicly say and state and go back to court and say the charges against Kenneth Walker are in fact dismissed with prejudice, which means they cannot be brought back. If he was to do that, then he frees himself up to reconvene a grand jury. And that is in fact possible. So that's one of the options that is there. A second option is that Daniel Cameron, given that his office failed to in fact provide to the grand jury all of the information, all of the potential charges, and allow the grand jury to make a decision, could in fact reconvene a grand jury. And we need to make certain that we make known that these in fact things that can be done. A third option, which really doesn't affect the Breonna Taylor case, is whether the prosecutors and Daniel Cameron, in their public statement, in their presentation to the grand jury, in fact violated any of the ethics rules as it relates to what a prosecutor should do in such a situation, or what a prosecutor may do in such a situation. I have not heard many discussions in this community regarding whether or not we need to look at that. I, for one, think that that is an issue that ought to be done. And that can be done by the Judicial Review Committee, or it can be done by the Kentucky Bar Association as a violation of the Code of Professional Conduct, or the professional ethics. How the case was handled is questionable, and things need to be done in regards to that. The other thing relating to the Breonna Taylor case are 2 additional items that have come up. One is the FOP, the City of Louisville's contract with the FOP was in fact renewed, renewed maybe a couple of weeks ago. And when you look at that contract and what is included in it, and even though it only goes through next summer, the reality of it is that several of the provisions that were in the settlement agreement with Breonna Taylor's mother, and several things that the criminal justice community across the country has said ought to be present in contracts with the Fraternal Order of Police, many of those are in fact missing. The question is, why are they missing, and why were we in such a hurry to enter into a contract with the FOP, given that we know that the basic indicia or the kinds of things that ought to be in police contract is missing from this contract? Why would we also go to have that done at the same time when we're asking for an external review by a body to look at how the police department in Louisville is organized, how it police, how it handles misconduct charges, all of those things? It was suggested that that the FOP contract that existed in the city of Louisville prior to the Breonna Taylor case, which is very similar to the contract that was ratified a couple of weeks ago, is one of the most restrictive, non-accountability types of contracts in the country. In fact, in terms of one contract being the most egregious, I do believe, if I read right, that the contract here ranks as one of either the second or third worst in the country. We need to begin to ask questions about how do we change our police department? How do we make it more accountable? How do we bridge the gap between the community and policing? You know, the police is to protect and to serve. And I think they do a very good job of protecting themselves, but a terrible job of serving us. Our community deserves more, deserves better, and we need to look at how that we are able to do that. And so as the city begins the negotiation process for a new contract with the FOP, we need to make certain that we as a community are having our voice heard in regards to what it is we're looking for, what it is we're expecting, and what we're willing to accept. We need to lift our voice and let it be heard in bridging the gap as it relates to this community. We're going to take another short break, and we'll be back in a few minutes to wrap this up.
A marker.
Jack, here we go. And action.
The Queen of Soul.
I was looking the word up, genius, an exceptional quality. So of course, Aretha Franklin has an exceptional quality. She has her beautiful voice, her amazing and brilliant piano playing, and she's the first American in the series, the first woman, the first person of color, and she was able to alchemize her life into sonic gold.
My singing voice has always been my guardian angel. Keeps me safe. It feels good to share with the world that Black women contain genius, that we are geniuses. I need y'all to follow me because we're gonna get lost otherwise.
Cynthia Erivo is just phenomenal. It blows me away to hear how much she sounds like Aretha and how she embodies her.
As just a fan of Aretha, I've listened to her music since I was little, and I was learning her music before I knew I was gonna be doing anything like this.
We gonna look good, we gonna feel good, yes.
This is a big show. We have a lot of costume changes. A lot of the pieces that I've done also replicates what she actually wore at certain events that we want to honor in the series.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
We're allowing the audience access to what it was like for her back then. And there was a lot of stress and trauma, and you learn those things and you just go, how did she become Aretha Franklin as we know her?
The idea that she was able to combine her music with activism is really special, and I don't know that people realize that she was an activist. They shoot us down like dogs, like our lives ain't worth nothing. It's time to make a stand.
People forget how powerful music can be considered, and she used that power to empower the rest of her community.
You got to disturb the peace when you can't get no peace.
That's why we celebrate her. She's the queen of soul. Your soul, mine, everybody's. She earned that crown.
Did you know that nearly 75% of high school seniors are accepted to their first college of choice, but only a little over half can afford to attend, according to a recent study? The outcomes prove the need for college-bound students to consider tuition costs alongside of program offerings. Simmons College of Kentucky offers 5 degree concentrations and in 2018 was named the most affordable HBCU in the nation. Simmons College of Kentucky, creating the next generation of thinkers.
Okay, this is Raymond Burse. We're back to wrap up this segment of Lift Every Voice program of the NAACP. You know, I talked to you earlier about education and what is taking place in our community. I talked to you about student assignment. I also talked to you about some of the events around the Breonna Taylor matter and in regards to police accountability. When you look at all of those issues, the reality of them that each and every one of them is political. Politics plays a major role in our lives in terms of what we do and how we do it. And in order to make our politics work, we have to hold our politicians accountable to us, accountable to the community, accountable to our kids, and accountable to our posterity. We need to do that. And one of the ways in which you hold politicians accountable is at the ballot box. We're just coming off a general election where we elected a new president for the United States, and our vote was in fact heard and heard loudly. That is where we can truly impact what takes place. A lot of people will say, oh, my vote doesn't count, it doesn't mean anything. Your vote does count. For those council members who voted to water down the ordinance as put together by the community committee, the one way you get back at them is you vote them out of office. In terms of what happens with student assignment, in terms of what takes place, you do that by voting for school board members who represent your interests and who will hold the superintendent accountable for that. We're coming off of this election, and most people are thinking the election is over with, so we don't have to worry about our voting. We'll have a general election or election coming up for mayor and other individuals within the next, I think it's 18 months. We'll be in 2021, 2022, whichever's coming up. But the way we make our voice heard is we've got to continue the process of making certain that every individual is in fact registered. So rather than us engaging in a voter registration campaign on the doorsteps of an election, we need to have a voter registration campaign every day. So for those who have not registered and the books are now open again, you need to go and register. And so if you're really interested in doing that, you can go to govoteky.org and on there register. We need to register as many people as we can to make a real difference in what takes place. I begin this program of Lift Every Voice with saying the NAACP thrives and lives on volunteers. So if you're willing to volunteer and to work with the NAACP, you can visit our office at 1245 Catalpa Court. You can call the office at 502-776-7608, or you can email us at louisvillechapter@lounaacp.org. The NAACP needs volunteers. It needs you. It needs your engagement. It needs your membership, because the only way we make a real difference is having our voice heard. And our voice can be heard by us doing the things that are necessary. And when our voice is heard, they will clearly understand that we are lifting our voice to be heard and to make a difference in terms of what happens in our community. Come join me at the NAACP. We need you because you can make a difference. And when you make a difference, our community becomes a different and better place, a better place for all us to live, work, grow, thrive, and to live. Thank you for watching this edition of Lift Every Voice.